Welcome back to the World Tonight here on BNC. The United Nations continues to send a dire warning about Afghanistan. It reports Afghanistan is now on the brink of a human catastrophe. The UN Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator is pushing for nearly $5 billion in aid for the war-torn country this year. In describing the crisis, the UN reports that 22 million people face starvation in the country. Another 5 million displaced Afghans in 5 neighboring countries are also in dire need of relief.
1 million children potentially suffering severe acute malnutrition. 1 million children. The figures are so hard to grasp when they're this kind of size, but 1 million children in Afghanistan at risk of that kind of malnutrition, if these things don't happen, is a shocking one.
The country plunged into an abyss of poverty, financial chaos, and unemployment after the Taliban seized control upon the withdrawal of U.S. and NATO forces. As we reported on Tuesday, the U.S. is providing $308 million in humanitarian assistance to help meet the urgent need for food and health care. Meanwhile, there are still a number of veteran groups and private U.S. citizens working relentlessly to help Afghan allies who are now living as refugees in other countries. Mariam Atash, a member of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council and an attorney, joins us now to discuss the ongoing humanitarian crisis. Mariam, it's good to see you. How goes the effort so far to help the Afghan people, particularly people who are still left behind there?
Thank you, Kelly, for covering this issue and what's happening in Afghanistan. The bottom line is there's not much being done, and therein lies the crisis. And this is not a situation where the Taliban just simply seized power. They were allowed to come into power based on how the U.S. handled its or mishandled its withdrawal. And so what we're seeing a few months from that is a humanitarian crisis, an economic crisis, because things are at a standstill. There's not an inclusive government that has been formed that should have been done before the U.S. withdrew. The banking system has largely collapsed. It's difficult for people to get out money and get money in. You have high unemployment now because it was a largely age-dependent country. And so when that was all done, this crisis now looms. And while the U.S. has said that it would give $308 million, it's a drop in the bucket of what's happening for which the U.S. has some responsibility. And what we need is more funds. I mean, the UN today, after some months of pressure from a lot of organizations, is asking donor countries for one of the largest amounts for aid for humanitarian assistance. But that's just a request. That doesn't mean that money has yet been provided or allocated. And as you heard those numbers, 1 million children, we're seeing images of very malnutrition situations. We're seeing children in hospitals without basic care, just dying for things that they shouldn't. And they should not be the victims of bad policies. They had nothing to do with the politics. And this is a largely young country, over 50% under the age of 18. So we're still seeing children punished because of the policies, and we need, political pressure to come to some type of settlement in Afghanistan so that the society can, live a normal life.
So, Mariam, it would appear, though, that the opportunities for making sure that Afghanistan could have a peaceful coexistence among its people, that opportunity has been squandered because of the Taliban being able to have control since the United States pulled out. In terms of that, what can private citizens in America do and veteran groups and even the U.S. Afghan Women's Council do to not only help the people on the ground, but also to help refugees who are still stuck in limbo in terms of getting help from their Western allies?
Well, Kelly, it's really the call to citizen action that I've seen since August 15th when the Taliban came to power that has been the hope. I've seen private citizens in the U.S. donate for charter planes to get Afghan allies at risk, people who fought next to our troops, against a certain ideology and for freedom and democracy. There's been aid organizations, nonprofit groups giving to causes in Afghanistan. Although it's difficult for them to distribute that aid, they are still doing it. and people can make their representatives aware of the situation and that it's important to them. This is what a lot of the veterans groups are doing. Members of the U.S. Afghan Women's Councils who have organizations have not stopped. They're still helping many programs, although much of what they were doing was evacuating the women that were implementing those programs because now they are at risk. But people can contact their representatives to say this is an important issue. This crisis has come up because of some responsibility our nation has. We need to do the right thing, and we need to help the people directly on the ground. We have to find a solution for the sanctions because much of the budget of the Central Bank of Afghanistan was held in the U.S. reserves. And that's been frozen, and there needs to be a solution for that because that represents money owned by the Afghan people that they can't now access through their banks. So citizens can make a difference. That's what I have seen in the last few months, and I urge people. I'm on the board of Nuristan Foundation. You can find us online. You can find other organizations through which you can either volunteer, and you can contact your representatives to say that this is an important cause and that we should not let these Afghan children starve, for a crisis that they did not have a part in.
Mariam, I want to thank you for the work that you've been doing. It's been a valiant effort, and you continue to do it and shine a light on the darkness that exists there. And thank you for bringing us up to date. Afghan American attorney, U.S. Afghan Women's Council member, Mariam Atash. Again, thank you. Appreciate the effort that you're doing.
Today marks 12 years since a major earthquake rocked Haiti, sending the island spiraling into an uncertain future. A look at the state of Haiti when The World Tonight returns.